My name is Dr. Toby Tewe, and I work with Afrimash. Afrimash, we're an e-commerce company, and we partner with different producers of agricultural products, livestock products, agricultural equipment, livestock equipment, and the likes. And today we'll be having a training on effective brooding techniques. Yeah. So for our farmers in the house, our poultry farmers in the house, today is for you. So we'll be dealing with effective techniques in having a successful brooding period. First things first, what is brooding? So we can simply define brooding as that period immediately after a bird is hatched. So it's described as the period in which special care and attention must be given to newly hatched chicks to ensure their health and survival. That's like a simple definition of brooding. Just like a human baby. Human babies, when they give birth, like if they give birth to a baby today, you can't just leave the baby to fend for his or herself. You have to take care of the baby for like at least a month. The baby will be wrapped like shawarma for like a month inside shawl, you understand? So for chicks too, they don't have developed feathers yet. They don't have their thermoregulatory system is not fully developed. So you have to help to provide an optimum environment for them to survive. You understand? Just like a baby too, you have to like be constantly tending to the baby, making sure the baby is not too cold, not too hot. The same thing with animals too. In this context, poultry birds. So for the first few weeks of their life, they have to be tended to for their survival. And in my notes here, I'm highlighting two major types of brooding. We have natural brooding and we have the artificial brooding. The natural brooding, we all know that is like for backyard farms. Natural brooding is it's a egg is put under the mother hen for like a few days. She has to like sit on those eggs, and then after a while, the eggs are hatched. We all know about that one. That one is the natural brooding, but that one can only be done for few, like it can only be done in like for backyard poultry farming for just few numbers of chicks. But for large scale production, you can't use natural brooding. So we have to use like artificial means. So in artificial brooding, the chicks are put in a temperature human controlled brooder, in a brooder pen, and this brooding allows for heat regulation, and then large number of chicks they can be raised in the absence of the mother hen. So for newly hatched chicks, like I said earlier, their feathers are not fully developed. So for like 1-2 weeks, maximum 3 weeks, they have to be kept in an optimum environment to ensure their survival. So yes, we've talked about the natural brooding and the artificial brooding. So now let's talk about what we need for brooding. What do I need for brooding? So we have several things that we need for brooding. We have the brooding equipment, feed, their water, their drugs, their vaccines. Basically, if let me talk about, okay, maybe you want to go into farming, you're a first timer and you want to start poultry farming and you want to start from the brooding stage. There are some people, I usually advise some people, if they can't do the if they've not done it before, get books, get materials on how to raise poultry birds, or just start with maybe buying 4 weeks old birds and then at least have little experience with that instead of just starting from the scratch, because it takes a lot of details and a lot of factors involved to raise birds from day old to maturity. So when you're preparing for the arrival of your birds, you have to have these things in mind that, oh, my birds will be arriving in maybe 1 or 2 weeks. You have to know that, okay, where you're going to put in your birds is already prepared, just like a baby. I'm making mention of human babies because we're very familiar with that, because most people tend to think that animals, maybe they're just animals. They are also living things that have to be taken care of. So I'm making mention of like doing comparison with human beings too. So just like the way you tend to a human baby, you should also tend to your livestock, also tend to your poultry beds. That kind of effort to put it into your livestock and your poultry beds. So like I said, when you're preparing to receive your birds, you have to have these things in mind, that all these things should have been prepared, all these things should have been available. Your brooding equipment, your feed, your water, your drugs, the vaccines you'll be using. The vaccines, although it's not like you have to get them immediately, but at least you should have a place that's okay. If I'm going to vaccinate tomorrow, should have, you know, told the vendor they are buying your vaccines from that, please, I'll be needing this tomorrow. Can I get it? And you can just get a day before and make sure it is refrigerated up to the point of administration. So let's now take this one by one. The brooding materials, let's take them one by one. So for brooding equipment, the major equipment you need, your brooder gas, at least what you are going to use to provide heat for the birds during brooding. Brooding majorly is like, you're providing heat in an optimum environment for them. So you'll be needing a form of heat supplier. So, and the different forms of heat supplies are, we have brooder gas, we have charcoal pots. There's some people that use infrared bulbs. There's some people that even use there is this electric brooder too that makes use of electricity. So there are different forms of heat sources for brooding. And we have brooder guard. This brooder guard, basically, it's a hard plastic material that is used to create a fence around the birds so they don't move away from the heat source. So they are quite close to the heat source, and then it just segregates them in a particular, space. So and the brooder guard is usually used like between 7 to 10 days max, and then you can just remove it and then you can use it for your next batch. And then I have the brooding thermometer. This brooding thermometer is very important because when people tend to they try to use their own body to regulate heat, and that I'm feeling hot, or maybe you enter a particular place, it's hot or it's cold or it's this. For birds, it's quite delicate and you have to be very careful because extreme temperature conditions can lead to some fatal conditions. So you have to be very careful, and that's why you need your brooding thermometer. The brooding thermometer is very important, so it helps you to measure the temperature in the brooding house. It also, there are some brooding thermometers that come with the option for to measure the relative humidity too. So that's also is also very important. So the brooding thermometer, you have a list of the optimum temperature for brooding: week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. Although for broilers, like 2-3 weeks, you should be done with brooding, especially in hot weather conditions. Brooding also depends on, you have to, as a farmer, you have to be conscious of the weather conditions. Like maybe when the weather is hot, like maybe for like the period one, we know that okay, the weather is usually hot. You should know that okay, and that's why I said the brooding thermometer is important. So when the weather is hot, you should know that the heat source required shouldn't be so much. So the thermometer will help you to measure that this is already going above the standard. So you have to like reduce the heat source, or maybe it's already getting too cold in cold weathers, like maybe in the rainy season now. You will need like a lot of heat for them. And the thermometer will also help you to measure this. So it's not like you're just using your body or your own knowledge to like measure that okay, maybe it's hot, maybe it's cold. The thermometer will help you. It gives you the value. So like I was saying, weather conditions are important in brooding. So when we're in the rainy season, you know that okay, you require more heat. When we're in the hot season, you know that okay, the weather is normally hot, so the heat required shouldn't be so much, you get. So let's move on from the brooding equipment that you need. So we'll move to feed. Feed is also is a major part, because if you don't feed them, they will not grow. So as a farmer, you need to know that if as a first-time farmer, I usually advise first-time farmers to do their research. I mean, ask from farmers in the area, what feed are you using? What's the result it has given you? So don't just go into farming blindly. You have to know, you have to like get results. Do a survey. Ask farmers around you, what feed are you using? What drugs are you using? Where do you get your stock? Where do you get this? Where do you get that? Okay, what are the results you've gotten from these things that you so it makes you like draw up, it makes you have an idea of what you're going to be getting, you understand? So one thing is very important: get quality feed, because this is the feed that the birds will convert into, growing. So if you don't get quality feed, there is a very big problem. So you have to get quality feed. Don't just buy any feed because it's cheap. I know it's quite hard these days, the economy, and raw materials are very expensive, maize, soya beans, and the likes. And then the price of these raw materials has, of course, affected the price of feed. So the price of feed is quite on the high now. And I know some farmers are trying to do shortcuts, to get very cheap feed. And then they still want to get the same results. It's a give and take something. If you give your birds bad feed, they'll give you poor growth rates. So if you give your birds good feed and you feed them very well, they'll give you good growth rates. They will mature very fast, and they will get, like, some others will be like, I want my brothers to grow big, I want them to grow big. And I'm like, it's not magic. Just like a baby too, human baby. If you don't feed human baby very well, you see the baby looking very thin and malnourished. So you have to make sure that the feed you're getting, the nutritional value of that feed, is good and top notch. That's why I said you have to ask people in the area that, okay, what feed have you used? If you see like maybe a farmer that is selling like his produce and you like the way the birds are looking, you can just ask questions. What feed are you using? Wow, I love the market weight of your birds. You understand? So moving on from quality feed, I was talking about, okay, the different feed. We have Bora, we have starter or chick smash, we have Bora smash, we have finisher, and we have layers for the different breeds of birds. So as a farmer, you have to know the different feeds appropriate for the different breeds of your birds. And then you have age appropriate feeders too. There are different types of feeders. There are metal feeders, plastic feeders. We have these flip top feeders that's usually used for young chicks. And then we have the adult feeders too. So depending on the one that you want, and then depending, because I forgot to mention the different systems of farming. We have deep litter and we have battery cage. So the particular system that you are doing will now inform the type of equipment or the things you'll be buying. You understand? For deep litter now, they are going to be on the floor. For battery cage, there are some people here, they've successfully done brooding inside cage, and I prefer that if you have the means to. But if you don't have the means, because deep litter can be very, very delicate, and you have to be very careful. You have to put your all. Also, but it's not like you're not putting your all into battery cage, but it's just that raising in the battery cage limits some kind of, limits the type of things that your birds are exposed to. So the system of farming that you're using will inform the type of equipment you're going to be buying. Then we've talked about brooding equipment, feed. I'll move to water. This water here, I used to tell most farmers that it's the water you can drink that you should give to your livestock and your poultry birds. It's not something that, okay, that you cannot drink this water, it's looking dirty, and then you are giving it to your investments. It's not good. They are also living things. You should give them what you can take. So give them the water, good quality. You have to give them quality water. You have to make sure that you have a source of water that is clean and fit for drinking for the birds. And then you have the age appropriate drinkers too for them, depending on your system of farming, either deep litter or battery cage. So you know the exact one to buy. So moving on from there, let's talk about brooding equipment, feeds, and water. Now we'll move to drugs, their disinfectants and sanitizers. This is very important. As living things, we are constantly exposed to different organisms, disease organisms in the environment. So it's just like human beings. Malaria is like our thing in Nigeria. Any small thing, malaria. So you have some people that say, okay, hey, they are quite they come down with malaria very fast. Like my dad now, he does prophylaxis for malaria like every 2 months, because he knows it comes down a lot with it. So for birds too, they are exposed to a lot in the environment. So you have to like prevent some of these like common diseases. There are some common diseases. There are some common diseases in the environment that you have to, prevent them from coming down with them. Because for brooding, brooding is very important. It's a very important part. It's not like other stages are not important. Like the rearing stage is also important, but brooding like determines a lot in the long run. It determines your end products. And let me say it that way. It determines your end products. So if your brooding period is top notch, then I promise you that you will have a very good end product. So for the drugs, you need to, like, before the birds arrive, you should have gotten your drugs like glucose. Especially when they arrive, you have to put glucose in their water for stress and then to give them energy. Then you give them, you have your antibiotics. The antibiotics is usually given like day 3, just for prophylaxis, to prevent. At least it's better to prevent than to control. So prevention is better than cure. So you need to have your antibiotics, your multivitamins, your dewormer, your anti-cocci. These anti-cocci is especially important for people rearing their birds in deep litter system. Birds are on the floor. It's not like birds are in the cage, don't come down too with coccidiosis, because there are different forms of coccidiosis. So it's not like they don't come down, but it's usually minimal compared to birds on the floor. So you need to have your antibiotics, your multivitamins, your dewormer, your glucose, and then you need to have, there is this disinfectant, this iodine-based disinfectant that you need to have. It's very important you have this on your farm. So, it's used for disinfection, used for, I'm still going to talk about a lot of things that involves these disinfectants I'm talking about. Also your sanitizers for your water too. Once in a while, especially if you know the quality of your water, once in a while you can just sanitize for them. Also people using battery cage system, you should know that once in a while you should be desliming your nipple lines. So it's not like water is just coming and then you're just year in year out. You have to, there's this thing called slime that develops over time inside the nipple lines, inside the pipes. So inside these pipes, this slime develops over time, because through those pipes you are giving them vaccine water, you are giving them drugs, you are giving them a lot of things. So it's passing through. So over time, it's just like you should even, if you use a particular cup over time and use it to drink water and you don't wash, you will see that, okay, when you touch inside that cup, there is this, how do I describe, slimy feel inside the cup. And the same thing happens with the pipes, inside the pipelines. So this slime develops, and this slime can affect a lot of things. It can affect the later on, like there's some vaccines that this slime will prevent from, the vaccines will not work effectively. It will prevent the effectiveness of some antibiotics. So you have to be very careful that I'm saying this particularly for battery cage farmers. Once in a while you have to, not even once in a while, like at least I advise like every 2 months, you should deslime your pipelines with sanitizers. So moving on from that, okay, let's talk about vaccines. Yes, I need to talk about the fact that vaccine is different from drug. Because there are some farmers, I will ask them, what drugs have you used for your birds? They will say they've used Lasota. Lasota is a vaccine. It's not a drug. Please. So vaccines are different from drugs. So vaccines are like, okay, what is used to immunize the birds against certain diseases. You understand? We have different types of vaccines. The common ones that we all know: Lasota, Gomboro. Lasota is used against Newcastle disease. Gomboro is used against infectious bursar diseases. These diseases are quite endemic. And what do I mean by endemic? They're quite present in our environment, and our birds are quite exposed to it. Especially for farmers that have been, rearing birds in a particular location for long. The microbial load in that farm would have been increasing over time. There's a saying that says, like, if you are the microbial load in a farm of maybe 6 months is not as much as a farm of 5-6 years. You understand? The microbial load grows over time, and that's why I used to say that farmers, you have to be careful. Over time, don't think that because you've been doing it for long, it has been working for you. There are a lot of things that are building up and you have to keep fighting against them to make sure that you don't incur losses. You understand? So let's move to the next. Okay, so we're talking about effective brooding techniques. So I define effective brooding as the ability to successfully utilize various goal-oriented techniques in order to achieve maximum results or profits, because this is your investment, so you have to give your absolute best. All right, so I was talking about different utilizing various goal-oriented techniques. So now we're talking about managing the factors to note that you have to, it has to be like on the palm of your hands. You have to note while managing your beds. So I have a list here of important factors to note in managing your flock during brooding. And funny enough, some of these points is not just for brooding alone. It's also during their rearing process and all. For broilers now, like max 8 weeks, they already reach maturity and then you sell off. But for cockerels, layers, and turkeys and the likes, they stay longer than broilers. They have a longer lifespan than broilers. So yeah, so my number one point here is biosecurity. This biosecurity is very, very important. I talk about it a lot to farmers, that if you have good biosecurity measures on your farm, then you've prevented like 80% of problems that may arise on the farm. You've cut off like 80% of your problems on your farm. So biosecurity measures are very important. There are measures put in place to reduce losses on your farm, to reduce outbreaks of any form of diseases on your farm. There are different biosecurity measures, like when you know that okay, your birds are arriving in like 1 to 2 weeks, you should know that you should have disinfected and fumigated your pen house and even the farm in general before they arrive. So, and then another point under biosecurity is that you have to reduce movements into your pen house or into your farm. Especially for people that are doing large scale farming, that you have like 3, 4 pen houses, you have to reduce movement as much as possible within your farm. Because when Uncle A comes and CB comes, that they are bringing different things from wherever they are coming from. And they are bringing it into your farm. You don't know what they are bringing. It's just like a baby too. They will tell you that for a newborn baby, not just anybody should be carrying the baby, because you can just infect the baby. You can bring anything. That's why you'll be seeing mothers giving you hand sanitizers because you want to carry the baby. I even advise people, don't carry someone's baby. It's just the same thing with your livestock, your investments. Don't just allow anybody to just enter your farm. They can be bringing different, and even if they're going to enter your farm, make sure they go through some processes before they eventually enter. They should wash their hand. That's why I talked about the disinfectant, the iodine-based disinfectants. Have wash hand basins at the entrance of your farm. Have foot dips. They will dip their leg. And that foot dip, there are some people that will erect foot dip on their farm, and that foot dip is sand and leaf that you find inside the foot dip. They are not using it. It's wrong. You should use it's there for a purpose. You should use it. It reduces half of your problems, trust me. So those foot dips, you should be changing it every day. The water inside that foot dip that has the disinfectants inside, it should be changed every day. Also the wash hand basin, it should be changed regularly. So because there are some farms that will go there and then you see their wash hand basin, there's already cobwebs all over. And I'm like, when last did you change it? Your foot dips too is empty, or the water will be like extremely dirty. Is wrong. If you actually want to do something, do it right. So like I was talking about the biosecurity measures, I said reduce movement as much as possible, and then make sure you keep your environment hygienic, the way you used to sweep your house and mop your floor. Your pen house too should not be dirty. There's some pen houses you get to, you see maggots on the floor. You will not complain that your beds are dying. Why won't your beds die? They will die because you used to think that these animals, they are superhumans. They are even more prone to infections, even more than we humans. They can't tolerate like microbial organisms in the environment as much as human beings. So any small thing, they're already down. So don't say because they're just poultry birds now, and then you'll be seeing maggot on the floor, you will not pack. Their litters will be dirty and wet. You will not pack and replace. You'll be like you are managing costs. If you are managing costs, then be ready to manage diseases too. Because some people will come, my birds are there, my birds are there, and then you now start asking them questions. Okay, can you give me this, give me this, give me this, and then afterward they run away. Why do they run away? Because they cannot answer those questions boldly, because they know that they've been doing some things wrong. You can't not do it right and then expect to get like a good result. So if you want to start like having good results, then you have to do some things differently from now on. So I was talking about, okay, keeping the environment hygienic, foot dips, wash hand basins at the entrance of your pen house. Then also, yeah, so that's like quite, although biosecurity is like a very wide topic, it's not even something you can even finish in a day. But I'm just like picking points out of this. It's something maybe later on, maybe we can now like talk about biosecurity as a broad topic. You understand? It's very wide. So now let's move to temperature regulation. This is important in brooding, in management of your birds during brooding. Temperature regulation is important. Like I said earlier in the beginning of this training, that these birds have not fully developed their thermoregulatory mechanism in order to, you know, like, and normal homeostasis. They can't like regulate their a lot of things well. So you have to, like I said, artificial brooding, you have to do these things for them. You have to provide the environment for them, optimum environment. So temperature regulation is very important. That's why I talked about one of the equipment you need to have is brooding thermometer. So even before like an hour or two before your birds arrive, make sure that everything has been ready. You've already prepared the place. You've already put the glucose inside their water, maybe multivitamins that you want to use. You already put it inside their water. You already make sure that you've regulated the heat. You've already like, okay, the heat source, everything is ready. And then your brooding thermometer to make sure there's this optimum thermometer, optimum temperature. Like there's the range, like the normal. Like between, at least for the first week, I know the first week the temperature should be around 32 to 35 degrees centigrade inside your pen house. 32 to 35. So it shouldn't be. And like I said earlier, it's also dependent on the weather. If we're in the hot season, you should know that the heat required won't be much. But in the cold and raining season, you should know that, okay, you need more heat. And the thermometer will help you to determine this. Thermometer will show you, okay, this is the value. Because the thermometer should be placed in the middle of where the birds are going to be staying. So it will give you the value. So you know if you are within the optimum, or you are below, or you are above. So if you are above, you already know what to do. You reduce the heat source. If it's below the optimum, you know that you are supposed to add more heat. You understand? So that's all about, yeah. Okay, for the temperature regulation, so yeah, there are some key things to note. You know, I'm very sure some people have the experience of, you know, when you're brooding and then you see the birds, they are huddling together away from the heat source. That means the heat is out of experience. You should already know that, okay, the heat is actually quite much. So you have to reduce the heat because they are huddling away from the heat. They are moving away and huddling together away from the heat source. That means you have to reduce. That means the temperature is quite high and you have to reduce the heat source. But if you see them huddling, like coming together towards the heat source, and then they're all trying to, like, you know, huddling together towards, and they're all like around the heat source, you should know that the heat source is not enough, and then they are cold and they are trying to move as close to the heat source as much as possible to get heat, and then you see them huddled together. The best when you know that, okay, everything is optimum, is when they are like evenly distributed inside the pen house. Okay, so okay, I've talked about biosecurity measures, temperature regulation. Now let's move to the humidity and litter management. I purposely put the humidity and litter management together because they quite go hand in hand in a way. So we already know, like, humidity is the amount of water vapor. The relative humidity is the amount of water vapor in the air. you hear me? The amount of water vapor in the air is what humidity means. So there is the ideal. The optimum is between 50 to 65%. It must not be too high or too low, because if it's too high, if the relative humidity is too high, then you will notice that your liters, especially for deep litter system, you notice that the liters is already getting wet, like very wet, and then the ammonia levels in that case will be very high, and it can make the beds prone to like diseases such as coccidiosis. And then even the ammonia levels too much, like high ammonia inside your pen house, can also affect you will see your beds, you will see them. Some people will be like, their beds, they have watery eyes. There are sometimes it might not even be a disease cause. The watery eyes might not be as a result, because most people, when they see watery eyes now, it's coryza. It's not every time that you see a particular maybe sign or clinical sign in your flock that is indicative of a disease. Not every time. There are sometimes that is what you are doing that you're not doing right. It's basically management issue. That's what is causing, and then you see some people already bombarding the beds with drugs. No. Just know that that's why when you come to a vet, a professional, and then you ask and you are telling the vet that okay, this is happening, the vet will ask you some certain questions that will make him be like to be able to come up with a diagnosis. And there are sometimes this diagnosis might not even be something you require drugs for. That's why you always have to seek professional help. Don't think you know it all by yourself, or you can just like ask anybody. Seek professional help. It might not be drugs. For some people, any small thing, you're already bombarding them with antibiotics. And that's why we have antibiotics resistance issue now everywhere, all over. So it's not even like you bombard with antibiotics or this or that. It might just be a very simple management issue. Like I was saying, ammonia. Too much ammonia, high ammonia in your pen house, it can cause watery eyes because it kind of burns their eyes. Birds tend to like they can't tolerate ammonia as much as human beings. So even though like it's a little quantity, and then you see them already coming down because of the effect of the ammonia compared to human beings. So you might even be saying that you cannot smell anything, but the birds, they can't tolerate it as much as us. So we have to be careful and note these things. Then when you notice wet spots too on your litters, change. Some people know they are managing money. Kasala now boss, you now be shouting and screaming for help that your birds are dying. As like I said, prevention is better than cure. So once you notice the wet spots, make sure you can, maybe if the spots are not many, you can just change that spot and replace with fresh, clean litters. And then once you notice that the litters are getting wet, change it, pack your litters. I even advise for broiler, because broilers, their litters tend to get wet faster than other breeds. So pack the litters. Don't say you are trying to manage costs. It's in your process of managing costs that you now start managing problems. So I've talked about humidity and litter management. Now let's talk about ventilation. Ventilation is dependent on weather too. Restrictions on ventilation is usually within like 1 to 2 weeks. And this is also dependent on the weather condition. Like I was talking about raining season, you have to like be observant as a farmer of the different seasons. Raining season, hot season, you have to know that okay, you can just open the window small in like hot season. In rainy season, you can keep the door closed for like 1 to 2 weeks and the windows shut for like 1 to 2 weeks. But in the hot season, especially in some areas in the north where the like Abuja farmers used to complain, especially when the hot is like the heat is quite much. You know that okay, ventilation as much as possible. Just you don't have to like keep everything closed, open, and then the heat source you require in that particular season shouldn't be so much. So talk about ventilation. Now let's talk about lighting. Okay, lighting, providing light, I mean like your lights, like the light bulbs for the birds to see and eat and move around. So your lighting, this lighting is also breed dependent. For broilers now, their life cycle is very short. And farmers, they are very careful. When they are in their head, they're already calculating like, once I get my broilers today, in the next 6 to 7 weeks, I should be thinking of selling them. At least they should have reached a very good slaughter weight for you to sell. So lighting is very important. For broilers now, you have to know that okay, for that period of, I give like a maximum of 8 weeks. For that 8 weeks period now, you know that you have to be providing light in the night. Don't put off the lights totally, because you want them to grow very fast, and convert the feed very quickly into meat. So you have to know that okay, in this period for broilers, even in the night now, you can like leave the lights dim. You might not totally like put on like all the lights, but even like for the brooding stage, For broilers, I would advise at least 1 to like 3 weeks. Keep the light on 24 hours. Keep the light on. So the broilers, if you keep giving them food, they'll be eating. They'll be eating. And if you're using a very good food feed, and then they are under favorable conditions, you will see them. They would, they'll mature very fast. And then it will, how do I put it? Because there are some broilers, even there are some farmers that will say at 6 weeks their broilers are already reached slaughter weight. So lighting is also important for them to move around, to keep eating and keep drinking. And then under this, you have to note that the very first 7 days of their life is quite, but that first week, the first 7 days is very important. It can make or mar your production, because birds within their first week of life, they focus more on growth than maintenance. 80% of their time is spent on growing rather than maintaining. So within this time, you have to make sure that you give them as much food as possible. You give them as much food as possible at limits, especially for broilers. You give them as much food as possible, and to make sure that, because they will keep converting that feed and turning it into, meat. So you have to be very careful at this period, because that 7, and I also usually advise that within that 7, after 7 days, you can just take the average weight of your birds and see, okay, how good have I, or how was your performance been so far. Like, you should know their weight at day old, and should be able to compare it with their weight at 7 days. So it's not like you're just walking and not seeing the result of what you're doing. You have to document all these things. We'll still get to that. So health and disease prevention too is also one of the factors to note in managing your flock. As much as possible, diseases should be prevented. A healthy bird utilizes and converts all your inputs into growing, and which eventually gives you a positive result. But a sick bird will be spending its time fighting infections, fighting diseases, rather than focusing on growing. So I know that disease organisms are very present in the environment, especially a farm that has, been in use for a long time. So be very observant. Notice the color of their poo. Notice maybe if they are weak. A weak bird is a sign of, oh, this bird is sick. A weak bird will, just like the feathers will be droopy, and then you probably see it detached from the others. So things like that, you should be very observant. You should check the color of their poo to see if it's normal. You should see if they are inactive, if they are not eating, because birds are supposed to be eating. Especially during their first week, they should be eating. So color of their shank too. The color of I describe the shank is like their feet area, the parts where their feathers will stop downwards. That's what I could describe as a shank. So there sometimes you can just like take notice of little things like that. If it's looking very dry, you should know that these birds might be dehydrated, and then there's some particular colors of their shank that maybe is indicative of certain diseases. So things like that you have to observe. Then I have here overstocking and overfeeding. These are major don'ts in brooding, because there's some people that be like, okay, because they're broilers and I want just keep feeding. Is very wrong, because at some points they might develop fats, and these fats, they tend to after a while they tend to grow around their organs, their internal organs. After a while they will just shut down. It's only like their liver. You see some birds are postmortem, you see around their liver, you see like a lot of fat tissues, and then it will lead to death. So you have to be careful not to overfeed. Have a feeding chart that you follow. Okay, this is the standard. This is what you're supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to be feeding your birds. This is the amount of gram per bird per day. So you should have an idea and don't give them too much above normal. You understand? And then don't overstock. Know your stocking density is usually 2 square feet per bird. Don't overstock. If you overstock them, it can lead to build-up of diseases. Then it leads to poor growth rates, poor feed conversion rates. So don't overstock your birds. Make sure you put your spacing requirements into consideration. Then I was talking about their feeding during lighting. So I have here ad libitum feeding. Some people used to ask, what's ad libitum? Ad libitum just simply means feeding around the clock. Especially, this is very important for broilers because you know they have a little time frame and you have to like achieve a particular weight at a particular time for you to be able to sell. Because you know when people want to buy, they won't buy a broiler that is small. It won't sell so much as a very big broiler, you understand? So make sure you feed them ad libitum. They have to, as their feeders are getting empty, you replace with another feed. Don't say that you are trying to cut cost and you expect the bed to just magically just, you know, grow very well when you're not giving it adequate feed. But also put it to consideration that you're following a feed chart. I know that this is the standard and you shouldn't go beyond that so you don't overfeed them. So another point here is farm record. This is very important too. It's a must-have. It's for documentation processes, documentation purpose. So you have a farm. Your farm is your investment, is your business. You have to document every single input that goes into your business, into your investments. I call it investments because they are spending money. You have to make maximum profits from it. So make sure you are recording all these things, because if you don't record, how are you going to like know that okay, oh, this is the result I've been able to achieve, or if I'm doing well or not? You know, I just feel you're just throwing money into a basket. You don't even know what you are achieving. So your farm records is important for you to document every single detail on your farm. And I listed here the things and these farm records, you are using it from the start of brooding till the end of their production cycle. So it's not just for brooding period, till the end of their production cycle. For broilers, now you know 8 weeks max, you're already selling them. That's like the end of their production cycle. For layers, you know those ones, they still stay longer on the farm until they start laying and everything. So all these records, you have to keep them every day. You have to invest in recording and documenting every single thing on your farm. So it helps, like I was saying here, that it helps to easily documentation helps to easily trace and monitor the performance of your birds, for easy tracking of your expenditure, your profit, and your losses. It's also to easily project future cost of production. You see some people coming to ask me that, how many bags of feed will I need for 100 birds, for 50 birds, for 1,000 birds? It is something you'll be doing over time. It's not a question you should be asking again, because you already know, like, okay, this is, because if you had been documenting, you should be able to go back to your records that, okay, throughout this production cycle, this is the number of bags I use, these are the drugs I use, these are the so I use, this is the amount I spent. Although for the prices of some of these products, you know, they tend to change depending on the economy. But at least you have an idea. So documentation is very important. You also document the average weight for broilers, documents for layers, document everything. Your average weight should be calculated for at least for that brooding period, if it's possible for the first 7 days. If it's possible for you, although you can just do when you receive them, you can just take their weight. Then at the 7th day also, all their average weight to know the progress so far. Then weekly know the weight of your birds. The weight of your birds helps you to know the small ones. You sort the small ones from the big ones. Those small ones now, maybe they've been bullied from eating. Sort those small ones and then feed them separately from the bigger ones. You understand? So your average weights should be documented. Your the feed intake, the water intake, the drugs used, vaccines used, their age, if there are any mortalities. Like I said, the mortalities should be documented. There's some people now, they got 100 birds. When you ask them what's the population of your birds, and they'll be like, between this and this. You shouldn't be between, you should have a figure. So you should be able to go back to your record and say, okay, these birds have died. So I received 100 birds. Maybe I've lost 5. So you have 95 birds remaining. And how could you know this? Because of your records. So let me move to seromonitoring. My time is fast spent. Seromonitoring, basically laboratory diagnosis. So I advise that you do this. It's very important. Laboratory diagnosis to, you know, for your day-old chicks, you can do seromonitoring on them to know that, oh, this is the protection they're bringing in from the maternal antibodies that have been passed down to them. this is the protection level or the immunity of my birds at this stage. So you should be able to know, fine, there's a vaccination schedule and everything, but still you need to, like, if you want to like do it like very right, you can just like monitor your birds to know, oh, this is the protection level they're at this stage. This protection level should have neutralized, and I should be able to have given, I should have given so vaccine before this protection neutralizes, to prevent, because all these diseases are very present. And then small thing, once their protection has neutralized, they just enter in and bombard your birds. So it's important that you do laboratory diagnosis of your birds. You also do for your water, advise new farmers that the water you're supposed to be giving to your birds, go and test it in the lab. Know the microbial level, know the chemistry of your water. If your water is hard, if your water is soft, salinity of your water, all those things are very important. Know the chemical makeup of your water, the microbial load of your water. And then your feed quality too is important. Like, I was talking about quality feed. The feed that you plan to use, you can just take some little quantity to the lab to test. Let me even know the maybe the microbial content of the, although a quality feed shouldn't have high microbial content, although there might be like microbial load, but there is a maximum, there's a particular value where it must not, if it exceeds that value, then that feed shouldn't be fit to feed your birds. So you should know the microbial level of the feed you are giving them, although this feed depends on, there are different batches of feed, but you can just invest in doing like maybe 2 months or every 3 months. Then toxins too, there are toxins in the feed that they are these toxins, they are slow killers, and they are present in the feed, especially this period where people are trying to, raw materials are quite on the high, and then feed producers are trying to manage everything, and then they use raw materials that are not so fit to produce feeds. And then you produce these feeds, and then the toxin levels, there are different toxins. Toxins majorly, they are metabolites of certain like fungi organisms, and then they are present in crop seeds like maize, peanuts, and the likes. So they use it now to produce the feed. In a GNC now, you will see very high toxin level. Maize, very high toxin level. That feed definitely will have very high toxin level. And they are slow killers. They keep acting on your system of your birds. And then you just start saying the birds are dying. You're actually not seeing there are some major signs that, okay, maybe indicative of this particular disease. But the birds are dying. As I tell farmers sometimes, when you're asking a vet questions, and then you just expect us to perform magic, there are certain tests that are usually advised that you do to be able to come up with, oh, this is exactly what is wrong. But if you are doing AEJ, doing 50-50 to see, use antibiotics today, use this one today, maybe it's work, you will just continue to lose the birds. So this laboratory diagnosis should be done. You can test your feed, test your water. Where is this infection coming from? You understand? And then it's also good to also like test your feed to know the nutritional components. There are some people that will be complaining that their birds are getting lame and this and that, and I ask them, what type of feed are you using? Maybe you should go and test your feed to be sure that the calcium level is okay. Know that, okay, you have to know the nutritional value of the feed, because the nutrition is important. Even if you are feeding them and you think you are feeding them well, the nutritional value of the feed might not be good, and then they are just eating, but the food is very empty. It doesn't have like, because there's a standard in which a feed is supposed, there's a particular level of different nutritional things that the feed is supposed to have. This amount of energy, it's supposed to have this amount of protein, it's supposed to have this amount of calcium. All these things, if they don't have them, they're just giving empty feed to your bird. So you have to know all these things. My time is far spent, so let me just conclude. So I put here that the effort that you put into brooding will determine your profits or your losses. And then it's a give and take business. It is what you give to your birds that will be converted and given back to you. So it can either be given back to you in low or high measure. You might make it big or make it like minimal. So you have to like put much effort into your business. It's your investment. So do as much as possible to know that you've done your best. And then you have to, that's why I used to say, get your birds from a good source. Don't just get your birds from just anywhere. And then the birds are bringing in maybe some certain things from the hatchery, because there are some hatchery problems too. Don't just get your birds anywhere. Afrimash, we sell quality birds We sell quality equipment, quality feeds. We sell quality drugs and vaccines. You can get it from us. Get your birds from a very good source, because if the birds are coming from a bad source, they will perform poorly. So that has to be noted. Then yeah, I always say that be the listener and not the doer, and be the listener and the doer. There are some people that are listeners. They'll be like, yes, I like that, yes, and then they end up not doing it. So as you're listening to this right now, make sure I would provide the slides that I'm reading, because I wasn't able to like share my screen. Be the listener and the doer. As you are listening, also make sure that you are doing it. You are putting these practices, you are putting it into play on your farm. You make sure you are doing them. And I think that's all for now. I hope you have questions in the comment section. Okay, there is none for now. If you have any questions, you can just reach out to us. We have the customer care line where you can reach us in Afrimash, and then we'll respond to all your questions and your inquiries. Don't forget Afrimash. We sell all these things I've talked about, the equipment, the drugs, the so and so, all these things we have available. Just reach out to us, and then we'll put you through. I'm also here to, as a vet, to also put you through all these things. Whatever questions you have, I'm also here to put you through. So that will be all for now. Thank you all for coming. I really appreciate. Thank you so much. I can see your comments. Thank you. That will be all.